When I was 10, my parents divorced. My mother left the house and disappeared. A few years later, my father married my stepmother. She was a very beautiful person and sweet as an angel to me. Being that she worked as a nurse, she used to take care of me whenever I got sick. I started to open up to her, and it seemed like we were becoming a real family. Until an incident happened. About 1 year later, I started to get sick. It was weird. I could feel my body was getting weaker and weaker. As always, my stepmother took care of me with all of her heart. However, something felt different. Sitting next to me while I was laying in bed, she took something out of her bag. The first thing that caught my eye was a syringe. She said she would inject me with a tonic to get better soon. To this day, I get goosebumps whenever I think of what she said, and how she said it with a smile.
I am an angel, and I'll send you to heaven. You won't hurt anymore.
After hearing that, I refused it because it felt really weird. She then kept saying it was okay and even forcibly tried to give me the injection.
You need a shot now!
Being scared, I kept saying I didn't want it. I eventually jumped up from the bed and ran away. She then shouted loudly from behind, chasing me with a syringe in her hand.
You can't go to heaven if you reject it like this.
I ran away screaming like crazy. Ah! Just then, my father came into my room when he heard my scream and shouted at her. She screamed and rushed at him.
It's time for you to leave too.
She then put the needle in his throat. However, he managed to block her and knock her to the floor just before she injected it into his body. Later, my father immediately called the police and she was arrested at the scene. Being terrified, there was nothing I could do but just flop on the floor. It turned out that she tried to inject us with a drug that kills people. The cops told me that if I had taken the shot, I'd probably be dead by now. The investigation found that she was suffering from severe depression and mental illness. Also, it turned out that she had been putting poison in the food which I ate over the past few weeks. In other words, I was dying slowly. I eventually recovered after the treatment, but I still suffer from the fear of that day. I'm sure you're all curious at this point. What could be the reason she tried to kill me? Well, I'm the one who's most curious about that reason. All I could say is that when she was taken away that day, she stared at me and hummed a song with a freakish, chilling smile.
Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
I've never been close to my mom. Ever since I was a little girl, we never really got on the same page. I don't know what it was. I would normally see little girls having the time of their lives with their moms. They'd go shopping, they'd watch movies, they'd make cookies and so on. But no, I don't have any memory, even similar to that. Mom and Dad got divorced when I was 8 years old. I don't know what happened between them, and I never asked. Nothing changed in my life, really. Only the fact that I wouldn't see Mom anymore. I moved in with my dad, who was the best person in the entire world. He would always do anything in his power so that I would get what I want. Living with him for the past 9 years has been a dream. Unfortunately, my dad died about a month ago. He passed away in a tragic car accident while he was coming home from work one night. It was raining and the visibility was limited. Another car coming from the opposite direction lost control and smashed headfirst into my dad's car. He died on the spot without any hope of surviving. So, because I was 17 at the time, I had to move in with my mom. I was a minor. I couldn't live on my own, even though I was perfectly capable of doing so. But the judge said that I needed to stay with an adult. I haven't seen her in such a long time. I did see her 2 times, but briefly. It seemed like she didn't want anything to do with me. And the day came to move in with her. An Uber left me in front of her door. She didn't even bother to pick me up. That's just great. She didn't even come to the door to greet me, I said to myself while I stood in front of her house with my bags by my side. Slowly, I started dragging them up the stairs. Step by step, I felt like they were getting heavier and heavier. The distance from the ground to the door was about 10 steps, but added to that the weight of the luggage, and I could barely keep my balance. Finally, I arrive up there. I didn't know what to do. Should I knock or should I go in? She is my mom after all. Maybe I should knock, I kept thinking to myself. I made the decision to just go into the house. As soon as I reached out my hand to turn the doorknob, I heard a sharp scream coming from inside. I immediately opened the door. Mom, are you okay? I asked while looking around for her. Yeah. Who taught you to come into a house without knocking first? She said. The voice came from a different room, so I abandoned my luggage in the hallway and went over to see her. Hi, Mom, I said as soon as I saw her in her bedroom. But something was off. She was sitting in the middle of the bed, with her back turned towards the door, doing something there. I couldn't see, but I saw her hands moving. Shut up, you'll scare them, she said while doing something with her hands. I asked what she was doing, and at the same time I approached her. As I got right next to her, I could see. She had a big snake in her arms, and in a bowl, there were some white mice. It's dinner time, she said while laughing hysterically. I got scared a little and took a few steps back. She then turned around at me. She asked me if I wanted to see how cute Johnny Boy was. This is the name she gave to her snake. Come closer, look at him, she told me while smiling in a strange way. I felt uncomfortable, but the moment I saw that huge and disgusting snake swallow that little and defenseless mouse whole, I got sick. Excuse me, I said while running out of the room. I went straight to the bathroom, and after I searched for it, not knowing where the rooms were, I just threw up everything I ate that day. That's disgusting, my mom said while hearing me doing it. I told her that I couldn't stand the sight of that defenseless little creature being eaten alive. How can you enjoy such things? I asked her while getting my head out of the toilet bowl and heading towards the sink to clean my face. So you'll be living with me, huh? I haven't seen you since you were a kid. You're not as good looking as me, that's for sure, my mom told me before turning around and going to Johnny Boy to feed him the second mouse, I presumed. She didn't show me where my room would be. I just looked around the house and found one that looked like no one sleeps in there. It had a small bed for one person, a dresser, and a small window, with the glass cracked. It didn't look homey at all, but I thought that with a little bit of patience and a lot of creativity, I could make this room much cozier. Later that evening, for dinner, I had to look in the fridge by myself. As I understood, my mom did not cook. She would just order food. But of course, on the first night I came into her house, she only ordered for herself, saying that she didn't think I was hungry because I looked a little bit too fat. So, as I was looking through the fridge, I found a chocolate bar and half a banana. It seemed that would be my dinner for the night, until the next day when I'll go and I'll buy some groceries. I ate those things and I just went to bed. At around 2 a.m., I felt something cold and wet on my chest. It was pretty heavy, too. I thought I was dreaming as I woke up, but my eyes were still closed. I tried to turn on the other side, but I just couldn't. It was something that weighed me down. I opened my eyes and I screamed as hard as my lungs could let me. Take this thing off me! I yelled at my mom, while there on my chest, her giant snake was slithering around. She came into my room and she started yelling at me, saying that I'll hurt her snake. Then after she took it off me, she smacked me in the face. I was speechless. I told her I don't have to stand for this nonsense, and I got up and started to pack. Where do you think you're going? She asked. I'm leaving, I told her. But out of nowhere, she grabbed my arms, putting them at my back. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. She forced me to go in one direction, and we arrived at one door. You're not going anywhere, she yelled before she opened the door and pushed me down the stairs. It was the basement. I hurt my arm pretty bad during the fall. It was pitch dark, and it felt like I was standing on mud. It was wet and soft. I got my phone out of my pocket and turned on the flash. My heart missed a beat as I saw that I was standing on maybe 100 snakes, all slithering around down there. I screamed, but all I could hear was my mom laughing. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. She didn't know that I had my phone with me, so I immediately called the police. They arrived in a flash and managed to get me out of there. My mom was soon checked into an institution for people with mental issues. The snakes were taken to different zoos, and I eventually got to live with my aunt, my dad's sister, until I went to college. I never heard anything about my mom since that day, and I'm really sorry that it ended up like this.
This is going to be your stepmom, Julia. Sasha, meet Julia, my daughter. How old are you, Julia? She asked. Don't you think you should have moved out of your father's house by now? When I got to my room, I had to rub my eyes because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. All my clothes were strewn on the floor, my bed, and some were hanging crookedly off the hangers. Even my underwear wasn't spared. The following day, I searched for an apartment and told my dad I was moving out. The smile Sasha gave me as I left tempted me to punch it off her face, but I restrained myself. Dad, what's wrong? That bitch, Sasha. She left me. She took your car, documents of one of the properties I transferred to her name. She sold off her shares at my company and ran off with the money. As I consoled my dad, I swore to myself that I would find Sasha. I would make her pay. I waited by my phone, hoping it would ring soon. I had contacted a private investigator to locate Sasha and bring me her details. I knew she couldn't have left without leaving any traces, even though it seemed that way. I sighed, thinking about my father. It had only been a month since she ran away with my dad's money, my car, and documents to one of his prime real estate. And now he had slipped into a deep depression. He really loved Sasha. He barely went to work anymore. My phone rang and I picked it up immediately. Hello? It was my boyfriend Nate, and he wanted to know if we were still going to hang out later in the evening. I told him I could not make it because I was still looking for Sasha. I had been seeing him less recently due to the problems Sasha caused. I had to be there for my dad. I don't get why you should be personally responsible. You've reported to the cops. Let them handle this. You're becoming so bitter, Nate said. I shook my head. He didn't understand. I could not just sit around and hope that someday the cops would find Sasha without doing anything. I told him that once I found her, everything would be over. He hung up on me in annoyance. I was frowning at my phone when another call came in. This time, it was the private investigator. You better have something good to tell me, I said, not bothering with pleasantries. It had been 2 weeks now, and he had not given me anything worthwhile. I was paying him a lot of money to get zero results. He told me he had found Sasha. Apparently, she was staying in a hotel in Rio, where she and my dad went for their honeymoon. She was being careful not to buy anything with her name, so it could not be traced back to her. I told him to send me the details of the hotel and her room number, and he promised to do so immediately. I smiled and thanked him before I hung up. I packed my things and booked a flight for Rio. Sasha would never know what was coming for her. I called Nate to tell him the good news. We had been dating for almost a year now, and we told each other everything. I smiled, sure that he was going to be happy for me when I told him I found Sasha. Had a change of heart? He asked. I told him everything the police investigator told me in full details. That's great. Have you told the cops? I sighed and explained to him that I was going to Rio to apprehend Sasha myself. Nate sounded disappointed in me and said that the incident had changed me into someone else. He said I was no longer the person he fell in love with. When I tried to tell him my plan, he didn't want to listen and told me to never call him again. My heart was broke as I ended the call, and I told myself that once I was back from Rio, I would go to Nate and everything would be resolved. My flight to Rio was spent with me perfecting my plan till I was sure nothing would go wrong. I got to the hotel and went to the front desk. I have a delivery for Sasha Raymond. I showed the receptionist a phony ID and business card, and she directed me to Sasha's room. I pulled my face cap low and knocked on the door before yelling that I had a package for her. She told me to come in, and I could hardly keep myself from smiling. I entered and turned around quickly to lock the door. Sasha stood up. wondering what was going on. When I turned around and she saw my face, her face paled. She shrank back and ran to dive for the telephone near her bed. I brought out a fake gun and told her to raise her hands up. She complied, trembling. "Julie, wait, we can talk this through." I didn't want to listen to her ramblings, so I told her to shut up. "I always knew you were a horrible person." Sasha got bold and put her hands down. "And so what? Did you think I could love an old and slow man like your father and choose to stay with him?" She laughed. "You can't do anything to me. They'll trace it back to you. Just go back home and cry to your daddy, you stupid girl." I got furious, but managed to clamp my anger down. I smiled at her. She had no idea I was recording our entire conversation. When I confronted her about running away with my dad's money, she was so proud of herself and explained in detail how she duped my dad. There was a tiny video camera in front of my cap, and it captured everything Sasha was saying. "Again, Julia, stop being a cunt. There's nothing you or anybody else can do about it." I frowned at her and shook my head in regret. I made sure I looked crestfallen and went out of the room. I went to give the police the video and recording after I edited it so it could not implicate me. They arrested Sasha because they now had more than enough evidence and knew her location. During the trial, my dad stood as a witness and got teary as he recounted the story. I felt pity for him as he broke down in tears when Sasha was taken away. She looked at him with so much distaste, and I wanted to punch it off her face. I consoled my dad afterwards, and he asked if I could move back with him. I sadly told him no. It was time for me to stay on my own. I promised him I would come over from time to time and not be far away. I had been trying to reach Nate since I got back from Rio, but he had been ignoring my calls. Today, I decided that I would go to his place immediately after the trial. I drove to his place, rehearsing all I would say on the way. If I could make him understand why I had to go after Sasha myself, he would see where I was coming from. I knocked on his door, and he opened the door after a few seconds. He looked at me with a bored expression. "Nate, why have you been ignoring me?" He sighed and told me that it was time for us to end our relationship. He said he never realized how much of a vengeful person I was. Even when I explained to him that I did nothing to Sasha and only got evidence for the police, he was immovable in his decision. I begged him to change his mind, but he was adamant. He told me to leave and promptly closed the door in my face. I spent the night crying. Even though I got the revenge I wanted, I lost something precious to me.